if you think about, I don't know if you have Apple products, for example, they said, overnight, we're going to update your system. We just need you to plug in and then we're going to improve your software. That's a lot of what sleep does for us. It's not a simple turn on, turn off the computer. We build things at night. Our immune system builds more cells. That helps us. It prevents us from getting sick. Over time. Um, but just thinking about you guys and KM and students and like, I think our our performance significantly improves. And by sleeping, we can kind of protect tomorrow's decisions and tomorrow's performance. And very likely, if you were to go to sleep early and just do the thing that you were going to do at night really early in the morning, you would do a better job at it.
To be very top of mind. I don't know, Janine, are you getting enough sleep? I know that I'm not.
No, I'm definitely not, but definitely more than what I used to, and I have really felt the difference. And I bang on about sleep so much. I read a great book. Was it Matthew Walker about why we sleep, and that was absolutely fascinating. There was so much good stuff in there, and I think the way I just find modern life is really fighting against biologically what we've been doing for millennia. And I don't see why it should be any different now. So, but we obviously need to put in practices to make sure we can sort of stay human around our need for sleep. Although I do appreciate when I was younger being able to go out and rock up to wherever it was after 2 hours sleep. Those days are gone.
Short window of your life that's possible.
Yeah, the lack of sleep. And that's good to hear, Janine, because that you've been working and what you said about modern lifestyle is fighting our ability to actually get those 8 hours. And I mentioned this doctor for the LA Kings hockey team earlier when I was listening to her talk about sleep. And, originally, Michelle, I was going to ask you, well, why aren't we sleeping enough? But I felt like maybe that's not a great question because I think the simple answer is we live in a society that values productivity. Productivity is linked to our inherent intrinsic worth as an individual. At least that's kind of the message, I think, in our modern culture. So I feel like we know why we're not sleeping. We're probably too busy, and there's definitely probably deeper, more nuanced reasons for that. And when I was listening to this doctor, she just kind of said, I'm not getting my 8 hours, and that's just how it is. Um, and the culture critic in me was starting to come out as I was listening. And I'm like, but should we not be critiquing the culture, the system, instead of just saying, this is how it is? And so I'm not going to get, my 8 hours. And I understand there's certain jobs, it doesn't allow for it. There's an asterisk there. Um, But I'm curious your door into it, Michelle, like from a systems level perspective, or do you like when you're advising a patient who's like, I'm not sleeping, or you have a sense that that's part of the problem, like how do we engage with this tension between the system does not encourage us to sleep, it doesn't want you to sleep, it's an always on culture, but our bodies start to tell us, in the body keeps the score, right? So how do we wrestle with this?
That's a tough one. And certainly we get shaped by the culture, the ecological structures around us. The at the basic level, I think it starts with a mindset shift because what culture has done is made us value sleep less. So on a personal level, what I would recommend to patients is, kind of going through the idea of like why is sleep important for you? And we have this sort of fallacy in our mind that if I sacrifice sleep and instead stay awake and keep doing things, I'm better, I'm more productive, I'm having more fun. That's not true. We have so many studies to show things like productivity, decision making is worse. I think there was a study done 20 or more years ago that showed even just getting 6 hours or less a night, you operate like someone who has a blood alcohol content of 0.05%. Like you're operating like a drunk person, but you're making decisions and you think you're fine. That's the difference. So, if we're able to, as clinicians in lifestyle medicine, if we're able to give patients information that maybe changes how they value sleep, I think that's a starting point. Um, Sleep, a lot of people talk about it as time to recharge, and certainly it is, but it does so much more than that. We actually do a lot of our deep learning during sleep. We do very intense integration during sleep. If you think about, I don't know if you have Apple products, for example, they said, overnight, we're going to update your system. We just need you to plug in and then we're going to improve your software. That's a lot of what sleep does for us. It's not a simple turn on, turn off the computer. We build things at night. Our immune system builds more cells. That helps us. It prevents us from getting sick. Over time. But just thinking about you guys and KM and students and I think our our performance significantly improves. And by sleeping, we can kind of protect tomorrow's decisions and tomorrow's performance. And very likely, if you were to go to sleep early and just do the thing that you were going to do at night really early in the morning, you would do a better job at it. That's how I personally convinced myself to go to sleep is, I could do this thing at 9:30 at night, or I could get up tomorrow early and just go to bed right now. And that actually seems like a nice trade-off because I don't want to do the thing at 9:30 at night. I would like to go to bed. So, but yeah, I would start with mindset shift first of all, and kind of find what value or what that you value sleep can improve. I don't know if either of you can think about things, when I bring up that example, but did something come to mind?
Yeah, completely. And as Sierra was talking, the rebellion in me was like, no, the world is pushing us to do certain things. It's like, no, I'm responsible for myself. This is my life. I'll sleep when I need to and I'll, not follow the, and that's obviously easier said than done. We're living in this attention economy. Everything's grabbing us. Everything's pulling our attention. This fear of missing out, and the pressures from work, the fact that you can't switch off and leave all of that behind. And if you've got any neurodiversity, I think that plays into it. If things are playing on your mind, if I'm finding myself, whether I'm neurodiverse or not, but I find at the end of the day, if I haven't had any time for myself because I've been busy doing things for everybody else in the world, I tend to stay up later and, to wind down, but that's not sleeping. And exactly what you said, Michelle, about the body does more than just, go on standby for the night until you've got to do it all again the next day. And you can really feel it in your health when you have a good or a poor sleep. And then when I sort of translate that into why sleep is good for business, if I was going to put a monetary value on it, it's, well, people make better decisions when they've had enough sleep for them. And I know through sort of as we get older or different parts of our life, we need different levels of sleep, or we have to manage without sleep. Say, I don't know if you've got a newborn baby, or like me when I had the puppies and they would just get me up every single minute of the night. You have to factor that into decision making. And I work a lot in high hazard industries, so the criticality of making the right decision. Yeah, we do sort of alcohol and drug tests, we do competency tests, but yeah, what about, have you had enough sleep to be making these decisions that are going to affect everybody else around you? That was fascinating what you said about, operating as if you had a blood alcohol content. Even if we take that to driving a vehicle. We wouldn't want people to drive when drunk. So there's so much around that with sleep. But I think coming back to what you said about mindset and what you value, I think we probably need total personal opinion here. I think we need to value ourselves more and value our goals and what we want from life, which sort of shape how we want to operate in the world and not be so influenced by the big machine pushing and pulling us to do things that are pretty much against our human or individual nature. Drop the mic, I'm off my soapbox now.
I love that. I do see sleep as a high performance tool. So if you need to translate, and if you're the type of person who has a hard time doing things for your own reason, but you're more likely to do things for other people, well, you're more valuable to your organizations, to your family, to your workplace, to your kids if you're a rested individual, if you've had restorative sleep. And generally, in an ideal world, we recommend between 7 to 9 hours, but you're absolutely right. There's different phases in life where sometimes that's just not feasible, but still trying to prioritize where you can is important as well.
Yes.
This is now my mind as I'm listening to this goes to as we talk about the workplace and how sleep is a performance factor. A lot of the major companies that come to mind right now, the top tech titans, we know folks that are working for these big companies are pulling like 80 hours to 100-hour work weeks. And I often ask myself, how is it like studies show, evidence shows that sleep equals performance? And in KM, we love a performance. I know one of my friends in the industry, Bill Kaplan, says KM is performance improvement. And so sleep sets conditions for that actually to happen. But I'm picturing myself, if I'm going to the board of, I don't know, take one of your big tech companies, to convince them on employee well-being and the importance of sleep. How do I do that? Because they seem like they're getting great results on zero sleep with people walking around with bunny slippers and robes inside of these companies that are like, I've just moved in. So how would you make the case, Michelle? If I know I'm really probably putting you on the spot, but I feel like you can handle it.
Well, I'll answer this by referencing that it's already been done. The
Oh,
the not necessarily in the tech world, but in medicine. Residents used to do 48, 72, you name it, hour calls, meaning that they were on hospital service for that time. And there's been a plethora of research done based on the amount of time they've been awake and medical errors, even, death, mortality that can result from that. And it has led to the reduction of call hours because we realize we have these drunk doctors running around, taking care of people in the hospital. It's not what you want. That's not what they're there for, right? They can't just be shells of people doing things. They actually have to make cognitive decisions. So now we have mandates and regulations around hours at the hospital and on call because we know that sleep is so important. It doesn't mean that residents are still very rested at this point in time, but what it does mean is there has been improvement to the pressure on them. So kind of parlaying that into the tech world, now we live in an age where we have measurement tools for sleep. And around the corner, I think we're going to be able to integrate that more, but we have sleep trackers. And we could talk a little bit more about those later. But if large companies wanted to just even do, some brief studies on that and look at the decisions coming out of the productivity or whatnot based on the amount of sleep hours or employee retention, for example, or satisfaction, etc. They can look at short and long-term indicators. But they have the ability to do that. They just have to remember that sleep is an important metric. And not just for health. We can use sleep to look at health outcomes too, but performance. So I think that does translate into the organizational, psychology and science of things.
No, that's good. I love the you pulled in there of it's been done over here, and we can take that lesson learned to show how might we actually ripple this out into other industries like tech. No, that's brilliant. And as we get more, I said earlier, I wanted to talk more about this personalized medicine, and you mentioned some tools that we can use, and we'll get to that. But I actually wanted to do a little bit of a fun thing right now around a personal scenario, as if I'm a patient, and I've created a scenario based on loosely based on characters in my life who shall remain nameless. I might be part of this scenario. I'll leave it to you to determine how well you know me if I show up in this. But I think it really represents a real life person who's struggling with sleep, what their life looks like. And I would just love to know from you after you listen to this is to kind of create like what is the sleep system you would advise in respect to where I am this character in my sleep journey. So are you ready for this?
Hey, let's go.
All right. All right. So I'm a 35-year-old woman and I'm building a business. And so, when you're an entrepreneur, as Janine knows, you're going ham all the time. And there's this fallacy that I'm falling into that if I just stay up till 10 p.m., if I just keep working on this document, I'll feel better and I can actually rest. And then I go to bed and my brain's just like just going. So what do? I roll over and I pick up my phone because it's charging right beside my bed. And I start getting on YouTube. And then I start going, down all the rabbit holes. And if you watch this, you'll like this. And then you like the next one. And suddenly you've been on YouTube for like 3 hours, 4 hours. Now you've been up almost all night, or I've been up. And so my sleep schedule is totally off. I might sleep a few hours before I have to get up for work. But then the anxiety sets in of my emails. And so I check my email first thing. I see the alerts, the notification, like cortisol spike majorly. And so that's how I'm starting my day. And then around 1 or 2, I start to crash. So now I'm sleeping in the afternoon and I'm sleeping for like maybe hours when I should be working and all this stuff gets delayed. So now I'm working till 10 again at night and the whole cycle's just repeating. So, Dr. Michelle, what do I do? I need sleep.
It really sounds like you do. And yeah, I mean, Sierra, that situation is so common. Patients come in with that concern all the time. And I do think it is a little bit of an epidemic now. I do think most people are suffering in this age of technology trying to regulate their sleep patterns. So with that, I would say from a lifestyle medicine perspective, part one, there's actually three things going on there. There's the sleep, there's the technology, and I group that a little bit into um, avoiding addictive consumption, right? So let's just say short form content or something like that is an addictive consumption, um, and then stress management or centering, right? So I like to remind people that the pillars of lifestyle medicine work symbiotically, but all of those things are having a moment there together and creating this um, the right conditions for poor sleep, so to speak. I'm gonna restate that I do think mindset's important, right? So being conscious and intentional is the first step to making any change, right? So again, knowing where your values are and why it's important for you to get to sleep. And it could be just because I don't feel good, but it could also be I'm really motivated to make this new business work, right? And and anchoring the need to change sleep to those values is important. Another element I would say is just I want to infuse a little bit of knowledge here. So what are the things that make sleep good? We need sleep go well. We need to know what those are before we make changes to move towards them, right? And so number one is consistency. So our body has a natural rhythm, a cascade of hormones and other processes that take place over typically a 24-hour cycle for most people. But in trying to get to sleep, we want to make sure we're aligning our sleep time with those cascading changes in our body, right? It's supposed to happen at a certain time that we fall asleep. And then again, based on all those cascades and triggers and cues chemically, we wake up later. So we want to hit those sweet spots in our rhythm. And to do that, we need to be consistent because we can actually train that rhythm. You have a little bit of agency over that rhythm. There are external things like light that make a huge difference as well with that rhythm, but we're going to try to train the rhythm in a way that matches up with those external cues. So consistency, I spoke about light, so darkness matters a lot for sleep. And there are some neurological processes that take place, but I'm sure everyone's heard at this point, you want to avoid a lot of light at night because that interferes with the creation of a hormone, melatonin, that helps us fall asleep. So our body naturally makes that hormone that initiates the sleep process in our body. So another thing is temperature. So we actually need a little bit of a cooler temperature at night to sleep. So that's another condition that we need to meet. We need to feel comfortable. If you're in a lot of pain, you're not going to sleep, for example. And then we need less noise, less distractions, anything that's going to disrupt our sleep and bring us to wakefulness. We need to move that outside of the environment. So knowing that is part one. Yeah, the second part of knowledge with this is, what are your barriers to sleep? What gets in the way of all of those things? So you just highlighted one, which is the screen, and the scrolling and the addiction. I mean, it could be, I don't know if this is the case for you, inconsistent schedules, like not having to wake up or go to bed at the same time every day. Maybe there's just no intention around that. And then just, I don't know, with your external environment, do you have lights on? Do you have noise on? Is the TV on in the background? Is the TV in the bedroom? Is the temperature set to a certain degree? And then finally, I would say, based on the scenario you created, what practices are you engaging in to help sort of quell those anxiety-provoking thoughts in your mind too? So for most people, let's be honest, let's focus on screens and devices and technologies, right? I think it's important to keep in mind for screens that these things, your internet-based tools are designed to prevent you from sleeping. They're designed to keep you awake and engaged. And one of the analogies that I heard that I love is they're kind of like a casino. So, the house always wins. They're going to be more powerful than you. You can say that you're going to go in and just play the slots, do it once or twice, but then, hours go by and you're stuck in there. And that's because it's been engineered to override all of your protective systems. So we do sort of need to look at these, technologies as the enemy of the night, so to speak. So that being said, the next part is to outsmart your future self with systems, exactly like what you said. Knowing all of those things, I like to tell my patients, you know yourself, you know the hiccups, you know the barriers. How are you going to outsmart tomorrow's you? You know what tomorrow you is going to trip on. So how do you make it impossible for that tripping to happen? Right? So when it comes to phones, willpower is not the lever we're going to pull here. It's not a match. It's not strong enough. So something automated with your phone is going to be your best bet. So there are apps that you could set to block your use of certain other apps or certain functions on your phone. There are timed power outlets, attachments that you can set that, 10 p.m. The TV shuts down. There's also dimming systems for your lights. I think Philips makes the light bulbs that you can control from your phone, and you can set a timer that gradually the light is going to dim over time, and it can be aligned with, kind of sunset, for example. So you can create these systems, but I would lean into automation. When you know something is a little stronger than you and stronger than your will at night, that's when your willpower is the lowest, by the way, especially by about 11:30. That's when people just really can't make good decisions for themselves. So knowing that, right, we're going to create a system that works around it. So I would lean into that. The next thing is, yeah, okay, we're going to try not to do those things that we know are not good for us, but we can't just have an absence of a behavior. We need to have a replacement behavior. And I'm going to back up. When I say behavior, I'm focusing on the behaviors before sleep. Sleep itself is not a behavior. Sleep is a natural process. The only way that we can contribute to sleep is by inviting it with these particular behaviors, right? So we can't muscle sleep. We can only control the settings leading up to sleep and wakefulness, and inviting wakefulness too. So replacing those other habits with something that you like. And that's going to be person dependent. But common things that we'll recommend is taking a bath, doing something warm and cozy. Some people like reading, some people don't. Sometimes reading is not a match for getting, the pull of your phone. But for someone like yourself who is talking about emails and feeling some sense of urgency in needing to respond or knowing what's going on or FOMO or all of that, a really powerful tool that's been studied is actually the brain dump onto just a pad of paper. It's part of the behaviors that you can do, not only the brain dump, but preparing, having that pad beside your bed, or I don't know, beside the bath while you're taking it, you're relaxing, you're just getting everything out. And it does something to the brain where you feel like, okay, I've closed the loop on that. I'm storing that information somewhere. It doesn't have to circulate in kind of my working memory right now. Because that's what we're doing. We're looping, we're like, don't forget, this could happen. Then try to solve it, try to take that, we'll write it out. And our brain starts to categorize that information differently. And it also feels like we've done something productive. And when you do something like that that feels productive, you can let it go. Now, it's not always perfect. It takes some practice. You have to believe that the world's not going to end just because you didn't solve a problem at 11:30 at night, right? But the more you do that, the more you realize, okay, yeah, the world didn't stop. So this might be okay. It has a solution. I do also invite my patients to look into other practices like meditation, breath work, something calming, something that brings the nervous system or specifically the parasympathetic nervous system to the forefront, right? When you're talking about those anxiety spikes, that's the sympathetic nervous system that's been activated. And that flies in the face of restfulness. So there's a lot of cortisol associated with that. And cortisol is a wakefulness hormone. So if we're doing things that are anxiety based at night, we're promoting wakefulness. So we want to pick a time, and after that, after this, I don't think about really hard problems. After this, I dump them out and I invite sleep so that my deeper brain can solve those problems without the cortisol spike. There's still a way to do it. They can still be solved. It just doesn't have to be associated with the cortisol. So and finally, some people do need a little bit of almost like distractive background activity. Some people like the TV on in the background. They find it kind of allows their brain to let go of certain things. And there is some research being done into binaural beats. Have you heard of the binaural beats before? So basically, you're hearing two different frequencies in your ears, so they're just a little bit off, and so there's a slight difference. And binaural beats and wave frequencies that are in, I'm just going to say the words So the audience can hear it, like delta or theta states. There's small evidence to suggest that that can help promote sleep and reduce anxiety, depending on which wave frequencies you use. But in the same way that some people have trouble concentrating unless they have, brown noise in the background, or some people like sleeping with white noise, that's an option for someone who really feels they need something to calm them before sleep, is those binaural beats. Same with meditations and those practices. Now, I'm not saying rely on technology. I'm just saying we meet people where they're at with behavioral change. We can't just say, well, you're here, but we need you over here. We can get them. I don't know if you can see my screen. Get them here, then here, then here, right? So some people just need that little shift, and it kind of gives them the value that they were deriving from a previous behavior that was maybe harmful in other ways. So we kind of try to replace the value with less harmful alternatives over time. So we've come up with some replacements, and then we need reinforcements.
Okay.
Cues, nudges, rewards. So I loved learning about the nudge theory. If you guys have heard that, you have, perfect. So what invites that behavior? What cues that behavior? What triggers the kind of those deep, psychological and behavioral mechanisms in us? And behaviors, again, they're physical movements, right? So if you see that there's the book on the table, you might want to grab it, right? It needs to be within reach. So you want to trigger that movement. If you don't see it, you won't be triggered to grab the book, right? So you want to, again, intelligently design your environment to trick future you into doing the things that are good for sleep, right? So yeah, I love the notebook. You can also do things like, I'm going to set out my kettle and put a tea bag in a mug. So
Janine's perking up. The British inside of her.
Michelle, are you a fly on the wall in my house?
Oh, perfect. But that matters, right? So, it triggers you, okay, I'm going to do the behavior of boiling the water and then pouring the tea in, and then I'm going to sit and I'm going to relax and I'm going to repose. So whatever it is, those little visible cues for yourself that are going to trigger, okay, next I'm going to, right? There can be bad ones too. If you leave, I don't know, Smarties. I don't think you have Smarties in the UK, but Canadian Smarties are chocolate. So if you leave them out on the counter, that's going to trigger you to want to eat them, right? So the other side of this is you also want to put away things that trigger behaviors you don't want, right? So you're creating that environment where it's hard to access. So it might mean at a certain time you're putting your phone in another room. Maybe also and when you do that, you go and set an analog alarm in your room so that you're not relying on your phone and you don't pick it up first thing in the morning. There's some value to going analog. That's how a lot of us grew up, and it works. It's fine. But and maybe that's not always going to be enough, but these are just some ideas, right? You're not going to do all of them at once, but I think you get the picture, right? You're setting up your environment in a way that triggers you to want to do the action. And then make sure that some of those actions are things that you really, really like. Like, that's a reward. It feels like for you, Janine, you're like, I can't wait for my time with the tea. That's what we want. We want you to have a good lead up to sleep, to have things that you enjoy, that you look forward to, that are also good for you. Do you have one that comes to mind for you, Sierra?
I mean, I love to walk,
Okay.
but I don't know. Some people say that adds stress to the body to move, but I find for me it's a regulating tool to move.
That's
Um,
fair.
yeah.
So commonly we would say after dinner walks are very helpful.
I,
And They promote digestion, which is still an important part of, leading towards sleep. I haven't really touched on eating, but, that's something that we always say we want to avoid eating about 3 hours before going to bed. But maybe that's your cue. I ate, I'm going to go for my walk, and after this is my wind down time. And you can plan all you want for the work you're going to do the next day cognitively, right? But something is going to be a cue. Now, this is my me time. This is my downtime. Now I'm going to engage in sleep as my power tool, or my performance tool. And then the last thing I'll mention is related to what you were saying, Sierra. You wake up with anxiety in the morning about emails, etc. And I would say in the same way, you also want to create a little bit of space for yourself in the morning too. It's one of the most powerful times to determine your mental state throughout the day. Powerful awake times that you can do that. That first little hour or so of your morning, even if you took half an hour. I strongly, strongly encourage my patients to do something centering so that you can operate from a grounded place before you make any decisions. So something like meditation, prayer, breath work, even if it's with a coffee in the morning. We don't always recommend coffee first thing, but whatever it is, initially that makes you feel warm and want to get out of bed. That's what I would start with, so that that there's a little bit of protection before you kind of go cortisol spike first thing in the morning. So we find that when people do those practices first thing in the morning, it has a greater effect on their level of anxiety throughout the day than if they were to insert it, let's just say at lunchtime or, midway through the afternoon. It's more powerful preventively than it is as a treatment or an intervention later on. So, I talked a lot there, kind of, we can summarize if we want, but a lot of the initial change needs to be related to mindset, value systems, and then an understanding of what's important in sleep. And then the second is to strategize, even if it's just one time. All you have to do is one time download that app, one time set those lights on dimmers if you can. Or, you don't have to do these forever. Just set it and forget it. And now you've got a system that protects you, and then create a system that promotes the behaviors that you want, and then have rewarding aspects to those behaviors. Finally, one thing I'm going to add, which is one of my favorite things to tell people because they don't all know this, talking to yourself out loud about what you're doing throughout all of these processes is actually very helpful. So speaking in the third person is actually a great evidence-based strategy for coaching. And especially when it comes to being on the phone, they've done some research on this too, but saying if you're going to use your phone, just saying all I'm doing is I'm going to check that one email and then I'm going to close it. And you say that out loud, and you say what you're doing, and then your mind remembers I'm doing that, instead of falling into the abyss of the social media world, right? Or anything else that pulls you in. But talk yourself through this and remind yourself why you're doing it. Doesn't make you seem unstable mentally if you talk to yourself out loud, but it's a common coaching tool, and it creates intention while you're trying to create habits. Once they're habits, they're subconscious. You don't have to put a lot of energy into this. It's just at the beginning you want to have a little bit of energy.
All right, Michelle. Well, that is amazing. I feel like, okay, the number one thing I'm taking away for, well, not myself because I wasn't in that scenario at all, is the brain dump. Like, that really resonates with me. I totally feel super productive after there's 10 stickies all over the wall of the things that are buzzing around. So I love that practice. I don't know for you, Janine, if there's anything there that besides teeth.
Yeah, to be honest, I feel a little bit emotional, like thinking about what Michelle said, because I'm thinking from taking my KM hat off and thinking about my journey as an entrepreneur. I remember the first day deciding, right, I'm going to be going solo, and every morning waking up with such anxiety and trepidation of how I was going to survive, what my business was going to be, and and knowing that I had to get through that phase and seeing how it affected my sleep, my everything, and the definitely the brain dump. So bullet journaling saved me so much. Not only did I manage to keep a really interesting record of like my years of building the business, but the brain dumping, the thought processing, this, like what Michelle said, you've kind of got it out there, you can let it go. And I think letting things go when you're building a business is really important because it makes room for all of the new ideas and the new decisions when you're not harboring all of this, sort of stuff inside. So definitely that. Um, yeah, so I agree with you, Sierra. I think the brain dumping thing is really important. The binaural beats, Michelle, I can totally attest to that. I thought it was just because I'm a musician, I like that sort of thing, but the way it seems to go into your body and your mind and relax, sort you out, help you focus, help you let go of things. It's almost this kind of, what do people say, biohacking, and a lot of stuff that Michelle mentioned there is, being conscious about our environment, our actions, our values. Yeah, I set a statement for my nighttime routine and my morning routine, which is almost like a little mantra that I live by, which helps to focus. So I feel like I've been hacking myself so much. But again, I go back to what I said before, I probably wouldn't need to do all that if maybe the world wasn't sort of pushing me to stay on all of the time or pushing me forward. So having I also reiterate Michelle's point about the mindset. And I don't necessarily think it's anything that we've said. It's the mindset that's right for you and what you want to get out of life, and having the courage to stick with that, having the courage to say no, having the courage to, value your path. And I think when you do that, you can align everything up in your life to suit that. And it's easier said than done.
That's powerful. And I guess I'm curious if you'd be willing to share what your mantras are, your personal statements around sleep and
But
wakefulness.
yeah, well,
That
definitely yeah, so the morning, so this all came about when I actually looked at my whole sleep pattern. So over a period of a month, I managed to work it around where I was getting up at about 5 o'clock in the morning and going to bed at about 9 o'clock in the evening, and I felt great because that sort of rhythm worked well for me. And the morning statement was all about getting myself set up and focused so that the winds of the day weren't going to blow me off course. So basically, I decided my day and how it was going to play out before kind of the world woke up. And I imagined myself as a ship and setting course to that destination and going to meet everything in the way that's going to blow me off that course. But I was just used to wake up with so much conviction, so much intent, so much excitement for the day, even though when there was some pretty anxiety inducing things like, I don't know, talking to CEOs or coming on podcasts like this. And, when you have that intent, that was so strong. Because I picked up on what Michelle was saying, that willpower alone isn't enough. And for me, setting an intent that helped me to make progress. Was equally as strong as, like, say, putting the phone in another room. Yeah.
and it sounds like you just feel better and you feel proud that you've done that, which is the most important part. So
Yeah, exactly. And through some of the things you've said, Michelle, I think the phrase having that inner knowing. So if I compare and contrast this with AI and technology and everything, we always sort of say in our world, Sierra and I, we always recognize the absolute magnificence of magnificence of a human, what we're capable of. We haven't even touched the surface of all of that yet. But I think what we do have is a very deep inner knowing. We might not be able to explain it. We might not even know it until it kind of unfolds in the moment. But I think through people like yourself, Michelle, who are like brokers in helping us understand ourselves and ourselves within our environment, there's a lot there. And then I think when you pile on the technology, that it's all these little mechanisms to help us better know ourselves better. And I think the bit that it is, I mean, this is just pure speculation from me being a person in the world and with eyes and ears. I think we're losing sight of or trust in our inner knowing and outsourcing a lot of that to technology. And I think the examples that you've talked about today, Michelle, are just such lovely, you know, um, combinations of how inner knowing and technology can really make us everything that we want to be and fulfill our potential.
Such deep insight,
Drop
you Janine.
beautiful, Janine. Wow.
I
You know,
don't. I think it just comes down to life's hard and everything's stepping in our way. And I think obviously with current climate of things, there's everything out there to stop us from being who we were born to be. So embracing technology, embracing people like Michelle to help us achieve that. I think it is really important.
And I'll add to it. It's hard when we're doing this as individuals, right? It's hard when you're trying to be countercultural. But the more there are discussions like this, the more people, like us, or maybe those that share our message today, engage in these types of practices, the more we can shift culture. And there's, I like to think about culture like, someone swimming, in a race. One person kind of has to break the water, but everyone else can start drafting behind that and have the current pull kind of go with that, right? It becomes easier and easier as more people do it together. So I think there's also hope in that, right? So in having these conversations, there's always the possibility of culture shift to create an environment that is conducive to the things that are good for our health too. And maybe that's the optimist in me, but I do see the pendulum swings over time, and I think it's shifting the other way now, where we may have that environment conducive to health. So,
Yeah, yeah, well said.
I love that. Before we sign off here, it's been such a rich conversation. There is one question that I really want to ask. Circling back to what we touched on earlier in the conversation about these breakthroughs that are happening. You mentioned CRISPR, you mentioned Neuralink. If I am somebody who sees myself as a potential candidate for these kinds of interventions, how does one begin to go about even accessing those? I know listeners are all over the globe, but if you just have some general advice, Michelle, um, for those folks to seek out these kind of things.
in for some of the cutting edge technologies, it is hard to access those. I would say best first steps is to look at large research universities. You want to find where the research is done because they're going to be associated with clinical trials. So trying
Okay.
to figure out if you can be a candidate for clinical trials at this time. Anything that's available, you want to find practitioners and physicians that are offering those services. But because a lot of this stuff is still being trialed, there is a possibility of participating, and typically trials are always looking for participants, right? So just a quick little internet search on that topic and look up, research center or something to that extent, and that should help you navigate towards that. Now, in the US and where I worked before, there is a database of clinical trials that you could look up with your government database of clinical trials. So that's another way to find out what's being done and to see if you can participate in a kind of a repository for people to look at it as well. I'm not sure about the rest of the world, but I suspect there are other ones in existence, not just in the US.
Okay, thank you. I'm sure that'll be really useful to people. Another good use of AI, ChatGPT, pulling information from from everywhere. And as we sign off, the last thing I want to say is, last episode with Dr. Delia McCabe, I think we touched on more of the darker sides of AI and technology. I feel like today we're sort of holding this tension, looking at the other side of the beautiful parts, what it's enabling us to do, how it can support human agency, how it can help us better care for ourselves, supporting that embodiment piece. So I just wanted to thank you, Michelle, for really painting a hopeful picture and helping us look at both sides of this. It's not black and white. Um, it's amazing to have experts like yourself and Dr. Delia McCabe who came on last time to really help us see this as a holistic picture so that we have the information, we're armed with the info to make better decisions. I mean, that's kind of what I'm walking away with here is each of these conversations setting ourselves up to make better decisions in everyday life. So thank you. It's been an incredible journey of a conversation.
Yeah, I can understand why your coffee dates last for 3 hours now.
Yeah, it's true. We can keep going.
Yes, I love it. Look, so, um, yeah, it is my pleasure, and some of my opinions eh, have been derived out of necessity. I need that hope to keep working. Right, some of it's a little uh, self-oriented there, but I I said this to Sierra before. I think everything is a tool, and tools can be used for good or for bad, right? We just need to know how to use them for good. And so when we look at AI as just another tool in the existence of humanity, we know that our species will still survive this tool, and find ways to wield its power. We don't want to lose hope because something is strong, right? We are still stronger as humans, and I do think we have a lot of great capability, and we will overcome some of the pitfalls of AI. So
I don't think I need to say any more than that. We'll leave it on that note. And thanks for joining us. And tune in for the next episode of Humans in the Loop.
Thank you.